You pour it without looking. The bottle lives in the same cupboard spot it has lived in for a year, and you reach for it the way you reach for a light switch. Oil goes in the pan gets hot. Nothing smells like anything. That last part is not an accident, and it is not your cooking. You did not do anything wrong here. You bought a bottle that said vegetable oil, and what came home with you was, legally and accurately, vegetable oil. The label did not lie to you. The label just stopped talking at a very specific moment. More than half of every drop of vegetable oil consumed in this country comes from one plant, not a mix, not a garden. Soybeans. About 54% of total U.S. vegetable oil consumption in the most recent full marketing year. And the bottle on this list that makes the loudest health promise, the one a lot of careful shoppers reach for, specifically because it sounds careful, is the same brand that signed a consent order with the Federal Trade Commission and 10 state attorneys general over cholesterol advertising. Then got sued again, decades later, over the words 100% pure. Here is the rule that will hold for every bottle we look at today. The front of the bottle sells you a plant. The back of the bottle names a seed. Neither one mentions the heat. Everything that happens between the seed and the bottle, that is where this story lives. Let's start at number 7. For years, the argument about cooking oil was about the fat, saturated versus unsaturated, butter versus oil, which number on the panel to be afraid of. That argument sent a lot of people toward the neutral bottle in the middle of the aisle, but the nutrition panel describes a molecule. It does not describe a process. And the process is where the interesting part is. Solvent extraction, bleaching, and a deodorizing step that in American plants typically runs between 455 and 483 degrees Fahrenheit, meaningfully hotter than the European standard. I want to be precise about what that means, because precision is the whole point. Nothing on this list is banned. Nothing here has been shown to hurt you at the amounts in a normal kitchen. Some of the compounds we'll get to are still being studied, and found in is not the same sentence as proven harmful. What I can tell you with confidence is narrower and more useful. There are things in that bottle's history that the bottle is not required to tell you, and once you know the words, you can read the shelf yourself. Every fact here comes off a current label, a court docket, or a regulator's own file. Number 7. Kroger's own 100% pure vegetable oil. It is the honest baseline of this entire category, and I mean that. Turn the bottle around, and the ingredient line is one word long: soybean oil. No blend, no mystery, no hedging. So look at the front again. 100% pure. Pure of what? Purity is a claim that needs an object, and this one doesn't have one. It is not telling you the oil is unprocessed. It's telling you there's nothing else in the bottle, which is true. It's also true of gasoline. And this is the moment to hand you the first word you'll need, because it explains the shape of every bottle that follows: processing aid. In U.S. food law, a substance used to make a food but not intended to end up in the finished product is classified as a processing aid, and processing aids do not go in the ingredient list. That single classification is the door that everything else walks through. Here's the door in practice. Most commodity seed oil is not squeezed out of the seed, it's washed out, using a solvent, typically hexane, which is then evaporated off. Because it's a processing aid, it never appears on a label. And in the United States, there is no maximum residue limit set for hexane in edible oils at all. The FDA has set limits for it in a handful of narrow products: fish protein isolate, hop extract, spice resins, but not for the oil in your cupboard. Other places drew a line. The European Union sets 1 milligram per kilogram in vegetable oils, and Canada sets 10 parts per million for edible oils and fats. Not a scandal. A blank space where 3 other regulators wrote a number. Kroger isn't hiding anything a competitor is disclosing. That's exactly the problem worth understanding. And the next bottle shows you how much personality a company can put on a label without adding a single fact. Number 6. LouAna. The name does a lot of work. It reads Southern, it reads home kitchen, it reads like a place. Fried chicken, cast iron, somebody's grandmother. LouAna is a registered trademark of Ventura Foods, out of Brea, California. A large, diversified oils and dressings manufacturer. There is no Louisiana in the bottle. The ingredient, again, is soybean oil. The panel adds a detail worth pausing on: omega-3 ALA, 950 milligrams per serving. That's a real number, and it's on the label. It's also doing something specific. It takes a commodity seed oil and gives it a nutrient to be proud of, printed next to a name that sounds like a person. Nothing on that bottle is false. The seed is named, the number is real. What's missing is still the same thing that was missing at number 7. And at number 5, the missing part starts to cost you something you can actually taste. Number 5. Member's Mark from Sam's Club. Same ingredient line as the last two. Soybean oil, 100% pure. On the label alone, it belongs in the same tier. The detail nobody reads is the one printed largest, the size. This is a brand built around volume. The jug, the 2-pack, the 35-pound container. And volume changes the physics of what's in your kitchen, because oil is not stable in the presence of oxygen, light, and time. A bottle you finish in 3 weeks and a jug you work through over 8 months are not the same product by the end, even though they were identical on the day they were filled. Which is a good place for the second word, RBD. It stands for refined, bleached, deodorized, and it's the standard industrial route for commodity seed oil. Part of what refining removes, along with color and smell, is a portion of the compounds that would otherwise slow oxidation. The oil is made neutral, and neutral is a state that has to be maintained. So the failure here isn't a lie on the label, it's that the label has no way to tell you the clock started. Now the next name is one your family has trusted for over a century, and it changed hands 4 years ago for $550 million. Number 4. Crisco. Crisco is not a store brand pretending to be a name. It is the name. The brand that taught American kitchens what shortening was, that lived in recipe cards and on the side of pie boxes for generations. That heritage is the product now. In December of 2020, B&G Foods completed the purchase of the Crisco brand from the J.M. Smucker Company for $550 million in cash. What was bought was not a recipe or a farm, it was the trust that name carries in a kitchen. And the bottle itself? Pure vegetable oil. Ingredient: soybean oil. Which brings us to the third word, the one that does the most work in this whole video, deodorizer. It's the final stage of refining, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Steam and heat stripping out everything that smells. In U.S. plants, that step commonly runs between 235 and 250 degrees Celsius. In Europe, it's often run 100 degrees cooler. That temperature gap matters mechanically. Trans fat formation during deodorizing is negligible below 220 degrees Celsius, becomes significant between 220 and 240, and rises exponentially above that. Fully refined oils have been measured carrying roughly 1 to 3% trans fatty acids formed during processing. No hydrogenation required. No partially hydrogenated oil in the ingredients. The heat alone does it. So the flavor was removed on purpose, and something arrived on the way out that nobody ordered. Hold that thought, because in 2 bottles it collides with a number printed on the front. If this is already making the aisle look different, a quick like helps more people find it. The next brand spent 12 years in court over a single word on its label, and the word wasn't healthy. Number 3. Wesson. Wesson has been on American shelves for over a century and looks like the most settled bottle in the row. For years, the front of that bottle said 100% natural. Buyers sued, arguing the oil was made from genetically modified crops and that the word had inflated what they paid. The case ran roughly 12 years. The first proposed settlement was thrown out by the Ninth Circuit, which said the deal, with plaintiffs' lawyers taking close to $7 million, while the class got under $1 million, reeked of collusion. The version that finally closed it, $3 million, and claimants collecting about 15 cents per bottle purchased. But the money is the least interesting part. As part of resolving it, Conagra agreed not to market Wesson oils as natural unless federal law or regulation changes to permit it. So the strongest evidence here isn't a fine. It's a word that used to be on the front of the bottle and isn't anymore, and the fact that nothing about the oil inside had to change for it to come off. 2 more facts fill in the shape. Conagra had earlier agreed to sell Wesson to Smucker for $285 million. The FTC moved to block it, saying the combination would hand one company somewhere around 70% of the branded canola and vegetable oil market. Wesson went instead to Richardson International, closing in February of 2019. Remember that 70% figure? It comes back when we pause the countdown. And the next bottle is the one most likely to be in your kitchen right now. Number 2 prints a cardiovascular claim on the cheapest cooking oil in America. Number 2, Great Value, from Walmart. This is the national bottle. If one cooking oil is in more American homes than any other, this is the short list of one. It is inexpensive, it is everywhere, and it works. Read the front. It is sold and listed as heart healthy, sodium-free, high in omega-3. 0 grams trans fat per serving. Now turn it over. Soybean oil. That's the whole ingredient statement. The identical statement as the bottle at number 7, which promises nothing about your heart. So look closely at 0 grams trans fat per serving, because it's the most technically precise sentence on the label. Under use labeling rules, anything under half a gram per serving is declared as 0. That rounding threshold is not a scandal by itself, but its scale is documented. The Environmental Working Group found that among more than 7,500 products containing partially hydrogenated oils, 87% did not disclose it on the front, with more than 6,500 rounding their trans fat to 0. A CDC analysis found 330 of 391 products that listed partially hydrogenated oils still declared 0 grams. And here's the fourth word, tied to that deodorizer we met at number 4, glycidyl esters. They form during the deodorizing step, particularly above 200 degrees Celsius, and increase sharply as temperature climbs. In 2016, the European Food Safety Authority assessed them and concluded they're genotoxic and carcinogenic. To be careful and correct, that's an assessment of the compound class, and dietary exposure levels in commercial refined oil vary by plant and by mitigation steps, and the industry has published methods that cut them substantially. It's not on your label either way, because it isn't an ingredient. It's a byproduct of heat. A bottle can be sodium-free, cholesterol-free, omega-3 rich, and 0 trans, every one of those true, and still be silent on the only part of its history you'd actually want to read. Which brings us to number 1, where the promise stops being general and starts naming a competitor. Number 1, Mazola. Mazola is the bottle people reach for when they are trying to be good. It has spent decades positioned as the heart brand, the oil for the person who read the article, who is watching their cholesterol, who wants the responsible choice on the shelf. In 1990, the Federal Trade Commission, working with 10 state attorneys general, charged the company then behind Mazola with false, misleading, and unsubstantiated advertising about the effect of Mazola corn oil and Mazola margarine on serum cholesterol. One ad cited in the complaint had a man marveling that his level dropped 17%. The consent order that followed barred claims about lowering serum cholesterol or reducing heart disease risk, unless they were backed at the time by competent and reliable scientific evidence. Then, in 2022, a class action was filed in federal court in New York against ACH food companies over Mazola canola oil. The allegation: the bottle was sold as 100% pure while containing hexane, which plaintiffs argued indicates the oil was pulled from the seed with a chemical solvent rather than mechanically pressed, and that buyers paid a premium believing otherwise. That is an allegation in a complaint, and I'm going to leave it exactly there. But this is the part you can check tonight. Mazola's own marketing today still runs on cholesterol. The brand's site describes its corn oil as heart-healthy and states it may help lower cholesterol 2 times more than extra virgin olive oil, citing a controlled feeding trial and plant sterol research, with the usual qualifier that it works as a replacement for saturated fat in an already low saturated fat diet. Those qualifiers are doing real work, and almost nobody reads them. And here is why Mazola sits at number 1 rather than number 7. Every bottle below it stayed quiet about the process. This one is loud about an outcome, loud enough to name a competitor and put a multiplier on it, while the process behind it stays exactly as unlisted as everyone else's. Nowhere on this shelf is the gap between the front and the back wider. Pause the countdown, because if you're picturing 7 companies competing, the picture is wrong. Go back to October 2008. Stratus Foods was formed as a 50-50 joint venture between ACH Food Companies and Archer Daniels Midland, and it became a leading supplier of fats and oils in North America to food service, to food ingredient buyers, and specifically to the retail private label market. Read that last part twice. Private label is the store brand. It's the bottle with your grocery chain's name on it, so follow the thread. ACH is the company behind Mazola, the brand at number 1. ACH is also half of the joint venture built to supply the store brands. Ventura Foods, a separate large manufacturer, owns LouAna and supplies food service oil lines. Bunge, in the business since 1818, is among the largest oilseed processors on earth. 7 different labels. A crushing and refining industry you can count on one hand. And you don't have to take my framing for it, because a regulator already put a number on it. That blocked Wesson sale we covered at number 3. The government's objection was that one company would end up holding around 70% of this branded market. Sit with that figure for a second. It didn't come from a critic or an activist. It came from an antitrust filing, describing the aisle you shop in as something close to a single supplier wearing several hats. This is what the aisle is actually selling, not 7 recipes, 7 paint jobs on a commodity that trades by the ton. The system isn't sitting in a room deciding to fool you. It's built to move oil cheaply at enormous scale. And at that scale, the story of any individual bottle stops being worth printing. Choice is the product. The oil is the same river, so ignore the refrigerator test. You've seen it. Put the bottle in the fridge overnight, and if it firms up, it's real. It doesn't work, and the tell is that the test circulates in 2 contradictory versions. One crowd says solidifying proves it's genuine, the other says solidifying proves it's fake. Both can't be right, and neither is. Whether an oil clouds or firms in the cold depends on its fatty acid profile, the variety, growing conditions, and how it was processed, none of which tracks authenticity. The UC Davis Olive Center has debunked it directly, and the North American Olive Oil Association called the home version completely false and misleading. No countertop test tells you what a lab test tells you. What you can do at home is read, and I'll show you exactly what to read in a minute. 3 bottles pass, and they pass on the same standard that failed everyone above, with one rule. Name one oil, and name how you got it out of the seed. That's it, not purity. Disclosure. Spectrum Organic Canola Oil, refined. The ingredient line reads, word for word, expeller-pressed refined organic canola oil. Look at how much that one line does. It names the seed. It names the extraction. Expeller-pressed, meaning mechanically squeezed rather than solvent-washed. And it volunteers the word refined, which the brand did not have to print. It carries USDA organic, non-GMO project verified, and OU kosher. 365 by Whole Foods Market, canola cooking oil, labeled 100% expeller-pressed. Their vegetable oil line is refined soybean oil, expeller-pressed, from used-grown soybeans, and it says so. Simple truth, organic canola oil, at Kroger, expeller-pressed on the label, one ingredient, organic canola oil. Now I have to tell you 2 things that complicate this, because you'd find them yourself, and you'd be right too. Simple truth is Kroger, the same chain whose bottle sits at number 7 on the fail list. And 365 is Whole Foods, which is Amazon. These are not underdogs. They're the same retailers, sometimes the same supply chains, which is the actual finding, and it's better than a hero story. The winner here isn't a nobler company. It's a bottle that chose to say more. Sold in many cases by the very same people who also sell the bottle that says less. 2 products, 1 aisle, 1 owner, opposite amounts of information. Nobody had to be a villain for this to happen. And be careful with the phrase expeller-pressed, because it's about to be marketed at you hard. It describes how the oil left the seed. It does not mean unrefined. Spectrum prints refined right there in the ingredient line. What these bottles give you is not purity, it's information. On this shelf, information is the rarer thing. Tonight, pick up whatever oil you own and look for any word describing how the oil got out of the seed. Expeller-pressed, cold-pressed, mechanically pressed. If there is no such word anywhere on the bottle, solvent extraction is the industry default, and that's your answer. Arrived at by what isn't printed. Read the biggest claim on the front out loud, then try to find anything on the back that supports it. Heart Healthy has no counterpart in an ingredient statement that reads soybean oil. Front of package language and the legally regulated panel are 2 different documents that happen to share a bottle. Open it and smell it. Heavily refined oil smells like almost nothing. That's the deodorizer's entire job. If you catch something nutty or green, you're holding an oil that was processed less aggressively. On its own, this proves nothing. Oils differ by seed. It's one signal, not a verdict. 4 things people believe that don't survive the label. Vegetable oil is made from vegetables. It isn't. It's pressed from oil seeds and fruits. In the U's, mostly soybeans. 0 grams trans fat means none. It means under half a gram per serving. Servings are small, and they add up. Expeller-pressed means unrefined. No, it describes extraction only. Refining can still follow, and often does. And if you're about to switch to avocado oil, slow down. UC Davis found 82% of commercial avocado oil samples were rancid before their date or mixed with other oils. 3 bottles labeled pure or extra virgin turned out to be close to 100% soybean oil. Their 2026 follow-up found the problem had spread into products made with avocado oil. Switching categories is not the same as switching to something verified. So here's what you can read now that you couldn't read this morning. You know processing aid is the classification that keeps extraction solvents off an ingredient list. You know RBD, refined, bleached, deodorized, is the standard route for a commodity seed oil. You know the deodorizer runs hotter in American plants than European ones, and that trans fat formation climbs sharply past 240 degrees Celsius, roughly 1 to 3% measured in fully refined oils, with no hydrogenation involved. You know glycidyl esters form in that same heat step, and that EFSA assessed them as genotoxic and carcinogenic in 2016, a finding about the compound, not a verdict on your dinner. You know 0 grams trans fat is a rounding rule with a half-gram floor. You know expeller press describes extraction, not purity. And you know that the one thing separating the bottles that passed from the bottles that failed was never quality. It was how many words the label was willing to spend on you. None of this required a secret. Every fact was public. A court filing, a regulator's complaint, a refining temperature in a technical manual, an ingredient line you could have read in the aisle. The whole arrangement runs on a quiet assumption that no one would sit down and put the pieces next to each other. That assumption just stopped being true for you. The front sells a plant. The back names a seed. Neither one mentions the heat, but now you know to go looking for it. If somebody you cook for just bought the heart-healthy bottle because it sounded like the careful choice, send them this. That's the person this was made for.